let's move on to Vodacom. Majority owned, of course, nowadays by Vodafone. Vodafone out of the UK, major player in Africa, in Asia, and of course in Europe and the UK. So that's one of the world's first-tier mobile phone companies, and Vodacom takes its pride of place in that network. I can tell you, they like this business. Its core areas of operation, though, are firmly in the southern part of sub-Saharan Africa. Massive business here in South Africa, where it's the market leader, but also active in Mozambique, which has got a big population, but not enough rich people, sadly. The DRC, I think you could describe that in the same way, and then Tanzania. So interestingly, under-penetrated early-stage markets, and then South Africa as well. Customer base. To put things in perspective, MTN 230 million plus, Vodacom 64 million people at last count. So MTN Nigeria alone has as many customers as Vodacom has in total. But of course, it's all about average revenues per user, not just about the number of raw subscribers you've got. Market capitalization of Vodacom, 200 billion rand, right on the nose. Price to earnings ratio quite substantially higher than MTN's, is interesting, 15.65. Dividend yield a touch lower, but still very good at 5.76. So, Grant, this one has had a much easier run, and you get the sense that it is really a much more steady operation. They're doing a lot of capex, but the sales of data looking particularly strong.
Correct, and I think that's a factor of having spent so much on this data rollout, and I think the strategy is bearing fruit at the moment, and that's why we're seeing the share price as stable as it has been.
Well, let's put it up, because by comparison, it doesn't suffer from the same sort of slump. It just looks like a nice steady march higher. And it's got the solid dividend yield. So really, I suppose in hindsight, this one would have been the one to own in the sector, because while everybody was cheerful about the scale of the addressable markets in some of these other foreign countries, areas, it's not looking as solid as just being in the home market where everything goes well.
Correct. I think what the market did was have a look at how saturated the South African market was.
Yeah.
And I think the market was really pricing in very low future growth. But it definitely paid and worked out for them.
So what you're implying is that argument about the industry being mature was really felt in relation to Vodacom. People argued that more acutely, and that's where they were doubly wrong, is because they were not able to see just how significant the uptick in average revenue per user of data would be and how much that would benefit Vodacom.
Correct. I think it's a very stable, I wouldn't say boring business, but I think the management definitely got the strategy right.
Yeah.
And at a stage when everyone was looking towards emerging markets for growth, people ignored such a solid investment case as Vodacom.
What about Vodafone and Vodafone's plans? Because we know that what Vodafone did was that they sold off their 45% stake in Verizon Wireless in the United States. They got an absolute boatload of money for that. They'd returned some of it to shareholders in, I think, some sort of a special dividend. They paid down debt. Some people anticipated that what they may do then is use some of that money to come and buy out minorities of Vodacom, but I've seen no mention of that. It looks as though Vodafone is comfortable just owning the 65% stake, roughly. I guess what I'm asking you, the question here is there a takeout premium that ought to be paid for Vodacom? Any sense there?
I don't think so. I think if we were to see a deal, I think Vodafone would have pursued the government stake far more aggressively, and they might have pipped the PIC.
Exactly. Good point. So just update us on what happened there. Remind us. Obviously, the PIC took that stake, but didn't they buy some and at quite a discount and then off-sell some of it?
Yeah, correct. So I think they were quite fortunate. The share price was quite low, and they still got a 10% discount. But of course, the government and Treasury were looking at raising funds. So I guess the obvious choice.
Who did they sell portions of it to? Just to other institutions in a sort of placement process?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
So I guess Vodafone could have definitely pounced on that deal if they wanted to invest.
That's the point that you're making that I think is well made, is that if Vodafone were aggressively looking to buy in more in order to capture more of those cash flows, they would have been a bigger player. And it probably, somebody told them, listen, it's good to have local shareholders, you guys must just calm down.
And with a more than 5% dividend yield, I don't think Vodafone is complaining.
As far as Vodacom is concerned, they've got that Year 2 scheme, which is attractive. They've got an empowerment shareholding. They don't seem to be at risk in that regard. From a regulatory point of view, they somehow or another eventually convinced both the competition authorities and ICASA to allow them to go ahead with the acquisition of Neotel. there's some kind of deal they had to do where they said they wouldn't change anything or retrench anyone or meddle with bandwidth, frequency, band allocations and all of that. Is it ultimately going to be fine? I mean, is that deal going to stick, and it's still worthwhile for Vodacom to have done the deal with Neotel, do you think?
I think the deal will definitely stick. I think what we're going to see is in 2 or 3 years' time, I think we're going to see the value of the acquisition coming through.
Yeah.
Vodacom, as you had rightly said, they can't fire any of the Neotel staff. They have to invest quite heavily into infrastructure, and they won't have spectrum to Neotel for the next 2 to 3 years, which begs the question.
So it's a bit like Barcelona being locked out of the transfer market. So what you do is you buy guys, but you say you can only play next year. And you're just like, oh, well, you know, in the bigger scheme of things, it'll be fine in the end.
And you hope that in 2 years' time, that spectrum will be more valuable.
I can still play. Okay, but to come back, we've got to go hot or not. We're running out of time. Fun conversation all the same, but Vodacom looks pretty warm too.
I'm divided. I think it's fairly valued.
So you reckon at the 15p, it's looking like it's at the upper end of where it should be from a value point of view?
Correct. I think it's a solid business. I think it's a great business, but I'm not going to go hot.
Okay, good. I like it. Independent thinker. All right, I'm going to go hot anyway because I like this industry a lot. So you can't have too much of these kinds of shares.